welcome to the Monday evening.
Love ball like I do. After Dark's a must listen.
It's where I go to get my hoops fixed.
This is Field of 68 After Dark.
Welcome to the Field of 68 After Dark on this Wednesday night, January the 22nd, 2025. I'm John Fanta. We've got CJ Moore from The Athletic here. We've got the great Mike LaTulip with us tonight. Got a loaded show coming up later on. We're going to play you a little excerpt from a conversation with Pat Kelsey, the head coach of the Louisville Cardinals, who have won 9 in a row and are in second place in the Atlantic Coast Conference in the top 25. But we begin in the Southeastern Conference, where tonight in Columbia, South Carolina, it looked like the Gamecocks were going to pull off a top 5 upset until Will Richards said, not happening on my watch. Florida escapes. And I do mean escapes. 70-69, Richard with 22 points, a game-winning floater that fell, and Florida gets the last stop to close out a win to get to 17-2 on the season. CJ, this game had a lot. You got to give credit to the Gamecocks because it seems like, especially at home, they're going to fight you. They are. They're going to compete. But Florida finds a way. What do you take from this game?
Well, I just think the resilience of Florida to hang in there, and on a night when it didn't feel like it was going for them, to be willing to keep fighting, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of their Missouri game recently, where they got down big early and didn't give up and just kept fighting and scratching and clawing, and they did lose that one, but made enough plays down the stretch in this one, and what I really loved was the play. Not only did Will Richard go make that play at the end, but Alex Condon, setting the Gortat screen to get him open on that last play. I really like Florida's bigs, that they just kind of do. There may be a weakness to sometimes with like defensively. You've seen some post players have success against them, but they seem to do whatever's necessary and don't really care about numbers. And for him to make an unselfish play like that, and Will Richard will get all the glory, but he was a big part of that last second play.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, this was a game where if you were South Carolina, you probably need to be up by 7+ with a minute left to feel like you had a chance and to feel like you could close this out, because anything less than that, I think, favored Florida. I mean, it's just one of those games where, if you're a team like South Carolina, you probably got to blow it open to not let the pressure towards the end kind of gobble you up like I thought it did. And I thought South Carolina kind of dominated this game for the majority of it in the paint. Murray Boyles was tremendous, and I thought they were the tougher team for the majority of the game. They prioritized the paint on both ends. Florida was missing bunnies. I thought they were impacted by the activity of South Carolina. But look, this game flipped when Florida went to the press with 8 minutes left. The game completely flipped. At the time, I think it was 58-45. Florida's down 13. They get a layup and they go right into the press. And the first possession, Will Richard tips the ball around, gets a steal, gets a layup. And for a team that was struggling around the rim all night, to get those types of quality looks off of turnovers, uncontested layups, dunks, I mean, it got them right back in this thing. And so that was the turning point for me. I thought it got Will Richard going to where when he makes that play late, he was in a rhythm by that point. But look, games like this where you're playing an 0-5 team in conference and you're expected to win the game, games like this, if you take care of business against the lower part of the league, if you have aspirations of winning an SEC title, if you're Florida, games like this don't win you the title, but they can lose you the title if you don't pull it out. Because other teams, the Auburns, we saw them already going to South Carolina. Plenty of teams will take care of business at South Carolina. Alabama did as well, kind of ran them out of the gym. So that's why you saw Golden at the end of the game be as demonstrative and emotional as he was, because he knows that this was pretty damn close to being the end of it for the SEC title hopes for Florida. And CJ, you mentioned the resilience, man. They pulled this one out. It was big time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a resilient effort to be down by 13 with just over 8 minutes to go, to put the press on. You're right about the rebounding piece. And for those who don't know it, Florida's tops in the country in rebounding margin. It's them. It's Illinois at the high major level. St. Mary's is in the top 5. Michigan State's in the top 10. Duke's just outside the top 10. But it's Florida and Illinois when we're talking about rebounding margin at over plus 11. And I think that, CJ, that this is the question that I have for you. Because, and it feels like this could change every week. But to me, it's Auburn, and they've more than earned that right, even without Broome, to do what they did last week going 2-0. A lot of people thought they'd take a loss and it'd be okay. It's Alabama for me after the win at Kentucky, what they continually show in terms of the ceiling. You know, sometimes we haven't always seen it. Sometimes they've had their nights where it doesn't always fully click. And then after that, you know, I would put Florida there if I were to put a pecking order in the Southeastern Conference. Is that how you see it? And what do you believe? Like, it's one thing to have a number 5 next to their name, but what do you believe when we talk about Florida and Final Four? That idea that they can be in San Antonio.
Yeah, I think it's possible. For sure. I think it's going to come down to their guards, and they've got to make shots, and probably 2 of the 3 have to make shots every night. Like tonight, Martin struggles, goes 1 of 8 from 3. But the other 2, Will Richard hasn't shot it great this year, but he shot it good tonight. And without that, he made a big one down the stretch, and I love the play. Golden ran like a hammer action to get him that shot in the corner that gave them a chance there in that last minute. And, I think it's their guards, because I think the teams that are most not susceptible to surprise finishes this year, like upsets, are the teams that have somebody that you can throw it to in the posts. And Florida really doesn't have that. I mean,
no.
I like Alex Condon. He's a nice player, but they don't really have that. So they are so reliant on those guards to score for them. And, it looked like they were going to get them tonight. But, Mike made a great point. Like the press saved them. And I do think Florida, they've got the athletes that can just kind of fly around, and that'll keep them in every game. And like, they can kind of make it helter-skelter and succeed in that kind of environment. But, I do think, like not having a post guy that you can just throw it to and bail you out on nights when you're not going to shoot it well, that's maybe something that they're lacking.
Yeah, I thought tonight was a really good learning lesson for them, because you're not going to not every game is going to be Kentucky 106-100, where it's just get it and go, get it out of the net, get up and down. Like, this was a really, really off-kilter game for them, because they still got in their rhythm of trying to get the ball out of the net and play with pace and get downhill and get quick possessions. But then South Carolina just drags you right back into the mud. Long possession, 25-second possession. How focused are you going to be? Because against Kentucky, both teams are going to play with pace, where if you concede a couple of defensive possessions, it may not be as big of a deal, because it's going to be a 170 possession game. Whereas this one is going to be less than that. So you need to be a little bit more dialed in on the defensive end. Like, every offensive rebound that South Carolina gets is a backbreaker, because it's another 20 seconds you got to guard. And so that's what I'm looking for Florida, is just the, not falling into the trap of like, hey, we're just playing with this pace and we're getting the ball out of the net, and like really, really locking in, because they have the pieces. Like, I actually really like the makeup of their front court. Like Chinyelu and Condon and those guys, I mean, they're really physical guys. And if you're a team that's going to chuck like Florida chucks, you need guys that can really rebound at a high level. And those guys do that. So they serve a purpose for this team. And yeah, I mean, I think being able to win in multiple ways. I mean, people talk about that all the time. Can you win in a variety of ways? Winning in this way on the road tonight when you're out rebounded, like flat out rebounded, which I don't think anybody would have expected going into this game for Florida. But you do that, you're still able to pull out a road win. So I think, Florida is still, to me, a Final Four caliber team. But CJ makes a good point. Like it's is Clayton going to come down off of no passes and just, chuck a three off the bounce? How many times is he going to do that a game? How many possessions is he going to concede? Because we know what it is when he gets rolling. So he can win games by himself when he gets rolling. And Will Richard getting going. I actually like the wrinkle thrown in that press. I would like to see it from them even when they're not down 13. Like that Will Richard that's a guy with a 6'9" wingspan, 6'10" wingspan, top of that press. That's really, really disruptive. And so I thought that was an interesting wrinkle that Golden threw in there tonight.
And that's how they had to create tempo, right? Like that's what they had to do to get
speed up South Carolina.
It reminds me of Bill Self always says, you got to win games when you don't play well. Like you got to win to win a conference title, you have to win a couple where you don't play very great. And that was probably that game for them tonight. That keeps them in the race because it's still they're two back Auburn right now.
Well, but the other thing is this. You enter tonight and you only had 2 road wins, Florida State and Arkansas. Mm-hmm. So when you are in that predicament here, going on the road is just going to offer different challenges. And in this league, you're rarely going to get a win on the road. Texas A&M just did. I mean, how about the Aggies? Let's go to it right now. Number 13 Texas A&M comes back and beats Ole Miss, a game that Ole Miss led the majority of the way. 63-62, a big win for Buzz Williams' team. They just affirm again, CJ, that they're top 15, that they're a top 15 team. And Manny Obeseki had the made three-pointer with 14 seconds to go. Zurich Phelps with the assist. A&M wins 63-62, and they get out of Oxford. And they had a good crowd tonight. They get out of Oxford with a big win to get to 15-4 on the year. CJ, when I watch A&M play, I'm like, they're a football team. They make it rugged. They get up in you. And Obeseki drills a three set up by Phelps.
How about that?
That's a mammoth win for A&M.
Hey, without looking, boys, how many threes do you think Obaseki had made this year?
I was just thinking probably less than 5.
6.
Right at 5 coming into the night. I'm guessing that was the only one he made. I'm guessing that was the only one. Like, the Ole Miss is like, okay, they got Manny Obaseki taking the 3. That's going to decide the game. You probably live.
It's 2 tonight.
He made 2 tonight. All right, it's end of the year Obaseki from last year. I mean, he was the guy that kind of got them soaring last year at the end of the season. So cool moment for him. But yeah, they're one of those teams that just like it's actually. I was talking to Nate Oates this weekend. And, they just lost that game to Ole Miss, and it followed the Texas A&M game, right? And he talked about how whenever they've played Houston the past few years, they've ended up losing that next game because it just wears you out to play it. And he said A&M's a lot like that. They're so physical, and it's so taxing to play those guys. And, Ole Miss, they won the first, 38 minutes tonight, but – they just keep grinding on you and wore them out at the end. We missed it because we were here talking. I didn't see it. I don't know if you guys saw the shot, but wow, that's crazy. I had turned the channel because I didn't think they were going to get it.
Well, listen, Ole Miss was up 60-52 in this game, 60-52, and in the last 3 minutes they commit 4 turnovers and a missed front end. I mean, for Ole Miss, who could have won at Mississippi State Saturday. They got out-rebounded. It's a big problem for them. But they could have won the game. in overtime, I thought they had it won, and they turned the ball over themselves. They got a little sloppy. It feels like at times, like when the ball needs to go in Padula's hands, Dre Davis is aggressive, but almost too aggressive. And man, that for Ole Miss, Mike, that's a gut punch of a home loss because you're coming off the rivalry loss on the road in a game that you could have had. So then you figure, timing's everything, right? Oh, we're going to come back home. We'll get A&M. And somehow, some way here, you lose an 8-point lead with just over 3 minutes to go in the game. And if you're the Rebels, that one's going to sting. That's got some sting to it. And Wade Taylor shot 2 of 12 in this game and 0 for 6 from 3.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, if you're Ole Miss, you're coming off the rivalry game, and you lose to Mississippi State. Coming into this game, A&M had lost 2 of 3. Like, this is not the conference you want to spiral in. This is not the conference where you want to start stacking losses in or making losing a habit. And so this was a kind of hilarious game, to be honest, because when you look at it, I'm sitting here with 10 minutes left in the game watching it, and I'm going, Ole Miss hasn't shot a free throw. Ole Miss is only plus 6 points on the 3-point line. Ole Miss is getting out rebounded by 13, and Ole Miss is winning this game. And you could feel it coming into this game. This is going to be a rebounding margin versus turnover margin game. One team wins that every game, A&M on the boards, and one team wins the other. Ole Miss in the turnover margin. So there's no surprise that at that 10-minute mark, when Ole Miss has the lead, I mentioned all those things. Why was Ole Miss winning? Because they had doubled up A&M forcing turnovers. A&M at that point had 16, Ole Miss had 8, and you look at the game at the end, and right in the last few possessions, Ole Miss turns it over 4 times. So, like, where was the push and pull going to be? Was Ole Miss going to start, really making up that loss on the rebounding margin, or was A&M going to start forcing turnovers and make them pay for getting down on the glass? And that's exactly what happened at the end of the game.
Listen to this. The first lead tonight for Florida and A&M in their respective games came on the last shot of the game. That is unbelievable that is how that occurred. It's also just another night in the Southeastern Conference. So get this here. Auburn is 5-0. Alabama's 5-1. And then you have 5 teams at 4-2. Missouri, Florida, A&M, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. So I'll tell you what, that just shows this league. And you're right, Mike. And I think, CJ, CJ, to me, is what's so interesting here. Is in the SEC, the majority of the league, you're going to swallow some lumps. You're going to take some losses. And it does get me thinking of, like, this is the epitome of the how are you as a team heading into the NCAA tournament? Did you let any swoon define who you are going into that? Are you worn down at all by the time that period of time rolls around? Because we all know here, it's not always the best teams. It's who's playing the best basketball in that moment.
Yeah, but we've seen plenty of examples of teams spiraling going into the NCAA tournament, and then they turn it on. I mean, basically every Syracuse Final Four run, right, I feel like is like that. So there's plenty of data that says it doesn't necessarily always matter how you're playing when you go into the NCAA tournament. But I would think what's important for these teams is win enough games that you have a good seed and somehow keep everybody healthy. Because they gave a stat tonight that I can't remember which game. I think it was in the Georgia-Arkansas game maybe, that like we're seeing more free throws in the SEC than any other league just because it's so physical. And I think, these games are so long, they're taking forever, and they are exhausting. So, like, I think these coaches just want to get to the NCAA tournament healthy and, like, rested. That's why I guess depth might be important this year. Like, I don't always think depth is that important. But in the SEC, it might be, just so that your guys aren't taxed by the end of it.
Do you buy A&M, Mike, if you were to assemble tiers of teams? I still am not fully sold that the way they play is going to result in them. Like, I don't treat them as this team that can make the Final Four. I just don't. I think they're a good team. I think they're a second weekend team in the NCAA tournament. Now, if Wade Taylor and Zurich Phelps are both going nuclear and they get enough offense, then of course, maybe. But I'm not in that class of that I can see them getting that far. I think it's a Sweet 16 caliber team. Is that where you stand?
Well, I think when you look at the NCAA tournament, there's two types of teams. There's one team that don't matter the matchup. You can be the team that it does not matter who the matchup is for you. If you take care of your business, you will advance. That was UConn last year. That was Purdue last year. And there's teams that are matchup dependent. And A&M is firmly in that camp of teams that are matchup dependent. Like if A&M runs into a team that is, can somewhat touch them on the glass and is a little bit more high octane offensively, that's going to be a really tough matchup for them. And so a lot of it's going to come down to draw, like it always does in the NCAA tournament. But when you start having to play the game of they kind of need this type of team and they need this type of game, that's not usually a great recipe for advancing and winning, getting into that 3, 4, 5 wins in the NCAA tournament. So yeah, it's going to be matchup dependent for A&M. But the reality is, there is something to be said about being the team that can guard, right, and can get rebounds, can get extra possessions offensively. The issue is that they're not a good offensive team. So they're generating offensive possessions for more just kind of average offensive basketball. So again, they could run into a team that's going to make them pay for that. And I'm really curious just to see as they finish the rest of SEC play, their schedule comparatively. I know to this point, they have Auburn one time the rest of the way. They don't play Alabama the rest of the way. There's wins out there for them. And if you're in the SEC, that's what I'm looking at is how many times do I play Alabama from here on out? How many times do I play Auburn from here on out? And how many times do I play Kentucky from here on out? Because if I'm looking here too, they don't even play Kentucky the rest of SEC play either. So there's some opportunity for A&M to get higher up on a seed line to avoid some of those teams that can do both, right? That can be really stout offensively, defensively, and on the glass. That's who you see on those top 3 lines most times.
We've got a break. Mike White just called in timeout. Georgia 63, Arkansas 63, 1:03 to go. Bulldogs have the basketball. Is Cal going to get his first SEC win as Arkansas head coach tonight, or will the Razorbacks fall to what would be an absolutely backbreaking 0-6 in conference play? That is ahead. Then we'll take a trip to Manhattan, where there's a special story blooming in New York City for the team wearing red out of the Big East. This is After Dark.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for the season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Go download the BetMGM app and use the code FIELD today. Now that the college basketball season is in full swing, you need to make sure that you have access to the best betting tool on the market, the Rhythm app. Spelled RITHMN, is a data-backed app that uses AI and analytics to identify inefficiencies in betting lines and the player prop market that will allow you, the user, to profit. You can create customized, analytics-driven betting models tailored to your personal preferences as a bettor. Users have access to up-to-the-second against-the-spread data. And if you're like me and you understand pictures better than numbers on a screen, Rhythm's internal trend analysis provides you with the kind of graphs that will allow you to evaluate past results and project future performance in a visual way. Every Division I college basketball team is included in the Rhythm's metrics. Free subscribers to the Field of 68 Daily will get 25% off for a Rhythm subscription. Use the QR code on the screen to sign up or download at the link in the description.
Welcome back to Field 68 After Dark. John Fanta, CJ Moore, Mike LaTulip with you. We're going down to the wire right now between Georgia and Arkansas. They're in the final minute, but we're going to head to what happened. What do we got? Oh, we got a turnover here. We have a turnover.
Maybe a kick ball.
50 seconds left.
That's what Mike White wanted.
We got a timeout here called by Arkansas. That game still has a little bit left. So let's go in the Big Ten here quickly. Northwestern and Indiana. Northwestern and Indiana from Evanston. This game is in the second half. And with 10 minutes to go, Luke Goody makes a three. And Indiana, they're ahead 50-49. Then Umar Ballo has a dunk. It's 52-49. And then from that point on, everything unraveled. Northwestern finished the game strong, and they win this game. They closed. They looked better down the stretch. They made the plays they needed to. Brooks Barnheiser, he goes for 21 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, and a face plant. Brooks, we hope you're okay. You're one of the toughest guys in the sport. Indiana drops to 5-4 in the Big Ten. And they're 14-6, and they're any bubble talk, they're right there. CJ, I'm going to start with you here. Obviously for Northwestern, you give them credit. They're tough in Evanston. 10 of their 13 wins have come there. But for IU, this is a game that they're leading. They've got veterans. They've got talent. They just can't pull through. What do you make of Indiana's status?
Well, I have a hard time watching them. I didn't watch tonight because I have a hard time watching them. There were too many other good games on for me to pay attention to the Hoosiers, and I think they're a really flawed team. I think that they have some nice pieces, but they could probably make some trades. If you could make mid-season trades in college basketball, I think they'd be looking to move probably Omar Ballo. They'd be looking to get another connector in there, another guard that can make some shots and guard a little bit, because defensively they aren't good enough. It doesn't surprise me that they couldn't get stops down the stretch. If you can put Omar Ballo in action and you can get him out trying to guard on the perimeter, they're toast. So they just have too many holes to beat good teams, to win on the road. They did get Ohio State's talented, and they did get a good win at Ohio State this weekend. So they have been, a little bit all over the place. But I guess if you catch them on the right night, they look all right. But I've caught them on too many nights where it's just they're too frustrating.
Go ahead, Mike. What's your take here? And what do you think of Indiana and their NCAA tournament hopes?
Not great, Bob. For Indiana. Look, I was actually really encouraged by the way Indiana closed that first half. I mean, there was a moment there after the OSU road win, and felt like a page was turning. And I talked about a month ago about just, hey, can they simplify things defensively? Stop with all the switching 5 ways off the ball, on the ball. Stop with the nail help, getting yourself out of position. There was just too much going on where I thought guys were thinking too much, and it was just kind of leading to a paralysis on the court defensively. And so, there were times where I think they've changed that. They've gotten more to a kind of a bare bones defense, which I think they needed. But then tonight, you can simplify your scheme, but if you're not assignment sound and understand personnel, it doesn't matter. You got Ty Berry, who shoots 38% from 3, and it's in how many different ways do you want to blow the matchup? Hey, they're going to go to a dribble handoff, and we're going to switch, but we're not going to switch up, and he's going to sit behind the dribble handoff and shoot a 3. Hey, we're going to not get attached to him when he's under the basket, coming out the other side on a pin down for a 3. And if you want to say, hey, Ty Berry's a shooter, well, we're going to run him off the line. Running him off the line is not jumping and getting up in the air and flying by a guy. That's not running a guy off the line. That is putting your team in rotation and really crippling your defense. So there was that. And Northwestern, give Northwestern a lot of credit. This was a team I talked about on the last show, because Northwestern also played on that night. I was pounding the table for them preseason because I thought it was crazy they were picked 16th. And Barnhizer and Martinelli, man, like these are two guys that I think are two of the more underrated. It's probably the most underrated tandem in college basketball. And Barnhizer in particular, just, last year he put up numbers that hadn't been done in this conference since Draymond Green. And he's doing it again this year. And like he's a potential, if Northwestern can win a little bit more, he's in like the first team all Big Ten conversation. That's how much he impacts the game. But look, Northwestern's going to match up hunt. That's what they do. They go to the back downs. Who's Martinelli got? Who's Barnhizer got? Who do we want them to have? And we're going to try to get enough switches to get that matchup. Tonight wasn't Martinelli or Barnhizer matchup hunt. They're matchup hunting whoever's on Ty Berry. And it was Mbako, and it was Leal, and it was Goody. I mean, it didn't matter. They were running all sorts of actions to try to completely flummox that Indiana defense, and they were successful. So it's hard to overcome 13 threes when it's already a team that plays defense well, that takes care of the ball. You give them 13 threes, they're too good in other areas for you to win that game. So we can talk about their tournament hopes and everything, but their next 7 games are Maryland, Purdue, Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State, UCLA, and Purdue again. Where are the wins?
Well,
where are the wins? Like if you're going to guard like that, I don't know where the wins are.
They better win. They better win on Sunday. They're at home Sunday against Maryland. Now, Maryland, let's face it, Kevin Willard has not been good on the road at Maryland. They have really struggled when they get outside of College Park. That's a big game. I mean, and at some point you feel like Maryland. Here's the thing with Indiana. We all know right now they could come out. They have a slow start. Those fans turn, and this thing goes south. Why? We've already watched it. We have watched this already. So when you're saying where are the wins coming from, the answer right now would be nowhere. Because you're at Purdue, you're at Wisconsin. Michigan's a better team than you. I think Michigan's a Final Four dark horse if they piece it all together with the different ways that they can play. Then you're at Michigan State. But before any of that, if you're losing those games, you are not going to the NCAA tournament. Right now, they're in the last 4 in our Fielding the 68, which releases twice a week. They do an amazing job. Mondays, Fridays, they're great. But this is not a tournament team. I mean, I just don't think that they end up making it.
It's crazy. Like and I'm just sorry to hop in here again, but it kind of brings me to my point again about like we talk about the net and what's your net so that you can get in the NCAA tournament. And this is why I have such a problem with people that like just say the net's trash and it's a horrible metric. You get penalized. People said over the years, okay, if you schedule lightly, it favors you in the net. Sure, if you blow the doors off that team. But if you don't, you get heavily penalized. And Indiana scheduled lightly. They had, 3 games against mid-majors. They won by single digits. So that's not going to help you. And then, every really good team that they've played, they've gotten run out of the gym. So that's why your net is the way it is. And so I don't think it's a bad tool at all because there's risk both ways. If you schedule a strong non-conference like North Carolina did, you keep those games close and have an average margin of defeat of around 7 points like they have. A couple that are, you take out the Auburn game and another game and it's more like 3 points. But, you schedule tough, great. But there's also risk because you can get run out of the gym by tough teams that you schedule. So the same thing goes for when you schedule lightly. You can say, oh, they scheduled lightly and they're just going to win by 30 and help their net. It's equally as risky to schedule lightly because if you don't take care of business, it's going to absolutely anchor your net. And we've seen that with Indiana. We've seen that with USC. There's Wake Forest is another one. And that, you get the Wake Forest is the team, you got five 300 plus Ken Pom teams and you beat them by an average of 11 points. And so I don't know why we're sitting here with Wake Forest saying it's crazy. The net's awful. And they're not going to create the net in a way that's going to be we're just going to let you get your team together. We're going to let you mesh. First 5 games of the season, you're just getting to know each other. That's not how it works. So that's a separate tangent about the net, but it's another tool that when you're looking at the NCAA tournament, like Indiana hasn't done themselves any favors in that regard.
CJ,
Arkansas
I
about
got
to do themselves a favor.
Yeah. CJ, I got to ask you the question before this goes final. If Indiana were to miss the NCAA tournament, what would be your gauge?
Oh, he got the rebound.
Yes, Thero got the rebound, puts it in, and that seals it. Arkansas wins 68-65. Thero didn't even need to do that, but he added some flavor to the first Arkansas SEC win in the John Calipari era. The drought, the losing streak, the skid is over. They were 0-5. They find out Boogie Flan's done, and let's do it right now. The Razorbacks, woo pig suey. The Hogs are a winner, 68-65. They beat Georgia. They were down in this game, and they found a way. And not only that, but that will lead Scott Van Pelt's Bad Beats. The line was 1.5. That is unbelievable. That's unbelievable that Adu Thero just hit that to win the game on the spread. He could have just pulled it out and then win by 1. The point is, Mike, Arkansas wins. They find a way to win this game. It was not pretty. It was not glamorous, but Georgia seems to be struggling right now. That's the other side of this. But at long last, Thero does enough, comes up big, and Arkansas finds a way to win. Thero with 17-11, Carter Knox with 13. Arkansas shot 3 for 23, Mike LaTulip, from downtown, and they won the game.
Needed it. In God knows how many ways they needed this. And you can tell, I mean, the way they were just celebrating after the game right there was almost like the team essentially kind of rushed the court there to get Thero. And man, you hope that for Arkansas, man, this is the inflection point. I mean, Calipari jumping up and down, happy to get that win for sure. But look, I was curious, with Boogie Fland out, does that simplify things? And it's nothing against Boogie Fland at all. When I first saw this team against Lipscomb to start the season, my question was, okay, individually, I like the pieces, but how is this going to work? What's the identity of this team going to be? Because I could see 4 guys that you could look at as the guy. And I've always thought when you have 4 guys that could be the guy, you don't have a guy. And at least now when you take one of them out of the equation, things can at least simplify a little bit. And whether it's late game, there's not as many guys that you're looking to potentially go and get you one. It's just, hey, it's probably Thero. It might be Wagner or it might be Davis, and that's kind of it. So yeah, this is huge. I mean, you've probably dug too much of a hole at this point in SEC play, but you've never questioned the talent with Arkansas at all. So it's really is. It's good to see them get this win and kind of get the monkey off their back. And you touched on it with Georgia, man. I mean, this is for how promising it looked. What, 2 weeks ago? You're getting buried here in a really tough SEC.
Yeah, I mean they did. They lost to Tennessee and Auburn back-to-back. Everybody's probably going to lose. Most teams are going to lose to Tennessee and Auburn back-to-back, especially when that's at Tennessee. I don't think a lot of people had huge expectations for Georgia this year, so I don't think we have to slam on Georgia too much. But did you guys see the end of that game? Did you see the last call that sent Thero to the line? It's going to be another controversial ending, I'm guessing, because when they slowed it down, it didn't look like there was any kind of contact there. It looked like he just kind of fell. But officiating is officiating. But I mean, this is what I think that, to your point, Arkansas is a poorly constructed team in that there's just too many guys that are ball dominant guards, and you might be right. Like maybe taking one away kind of helps them, and it's also going to make it so they only got 8 scholarship players, right? Nobody should be looking over their shoulder and worrying about playing time. Like maybe this is what unlocks it for John L. Davis, but him and DJ Wagner both went 3 of 14 tonight. to be able to win when they both go 3 of 14 is pretty wild. But I will give them this. Offensively, like it was very ugly tonight, but these kids do continue to battle and they're playing hard. And I think John's best era, his best time at Kentucky, his guys would always guard, always play hard, and usually looked a little better offensively than this iteration looks. But I will give it to him that his kids are continuing to battle and they're continuing to play hard, and guys aren't checking out. And that's pretty much what won them the game tonight. Like they still guarded, they just kept chipping away, and eventually they made a bunch of free throws and they got the win. I'm surprised they were able to do it watching the first 3 quarters of that game, but good for them. They got one.
I just congratulations to Arkansas for winning the ball game. But I'm sorry, man. I mean, John L. Davis, what happened? Like what in the world occurred here? Of how do you go from Florida Atlantic and being one of the faces of a Final Four run, to a level that I think if you weren't at Arkansas, you'd be at another high major. Let's face it. And how is he shooting 3 for 14? And how is he shooting 1 for 10 from 3 in a game? 1 for 10 from 3 in a game. But this has happened throughout the season. And so I'm not disagreeing with Mike on the ball dominant stuff, because I think you're right. Like that puzzle, the puzzle pieces haven't fit. And you could win a game at home against a Georgia and still not have them fit. Now, I give the kids a lot of credit. Adu Thero and Knox, they found a way and they fight hard. But to me, what it feels like is, it feels like a restaurant that you grew up going to and that you loved. Then you left town. You went to college. You didn't come back for a long time. Then you go back, COVID happens. There's a relatability scale here. There has to be. Then you go back to the restaurant after COVID or after a long gap of time, and you sit down for a meal and you start to taste it and you're like, this isn't the same recipe. This isn't what I remembered it for. What did they change? Well, we had to cut that from the menu. Like we don't serve that anymore. We don't have that any longer. It's like this. Have you heard that Chick-fil-A changed their waffle fries? Have you heard that? They changed up their waffle fries. That's what well, they have. And guess what? They're not as good. They're not as good. And somebody like me noticed that, okay? They do. You're trying the same thing over and over again. John L. Davis isn't that bad of a player. He's just not. How has this gotten to a point where the pieces where you're trying square peg round hole this much?
I mean, I'll tell you how, because college basketball isn't a video game, and the transfer portal is not a video game. Like you don't just go and say 18 points a game at Florida Atlantic, stick them onto our team at Arkansas, and we got ourselves 15 to 18 points a game. Because when you go and look at how he was used at FAU and how he's used at Arkansas, it's the inverse. It's the complete inverse. Like his most used possessions at FAU were in isolation. His most used possessions were in pick and roll, and it is flipped this year. There's almost no isolation. There's almost no pick and roll. And how do you expect to get the same Nelly Davis when you are not putting Nelly Davis in a position to be Nelly Davis? And what I think too is, and this is just real from a player's perspective, is that when you go back and watch FAU highlights and clips of Nelly Davis, you'd be like, he looks like he's got a little more bounce. Like he looks like he's got a little more burst and has like a little bit more like shit to him. And I'm a firm believer, I've always believed this, that confidence and athleticism are tied together. When you're more sure of yourself, you're more sure of your movements.
For sure.
And I firmly believe that that's part of what's plaguing him right now. Like, I don't see him playing with that same type of like, and it's not like fire, it's not effort, it's none of that with him, but just kind of that same like swagger to him. And that's why I'm really, really hoping he can get it back. Because if he gets it back, this Arkansas team steps up another level because he's that talented. And we've seen over the years at FAU, didn't matter. Like, they played high major opponents on a number of occasions. And he had, 19, 25. Like, he could really, really, really produce. But he's been kind of deduced to this, catch and shoot guy this year. And that's just not – he's a good catch and shoot guy, but, like, the quality of looks aren't high enough for him to consistently, I think, hit from the outside. Even though he's 34, 35%, he's probably an even better three-point shooter than that. But when I talk about isolation and pick and roll, I mean, this is a dude that's 85%, 90-plus this year, but 85% from the free throw line. In his career, he's shooting 0.9 free throws a game. Like, how can we get him to the line? Can that get him going? If that gets him going, he's a little more confident. He's a little more confident. He's a little more athletic. I mean, it's all baked into the pie for him. So that's a lot on Nelly Davis, and I don't want it to sound negative because I love his game, and I've just been kind of like at this Arkansas, they hit another gear if they can get him going.
Let's take a break. After this, we'll go around the rest of the country. You're watching the Field 68 After Dark.
There is no sport in America that is more difficult to follow than college basketball. It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for injury updates, recruiting news, and transfer portal additions that actually matter. For just $50 a year, get access to the same information that your favorite team's coaching staff is subscribed for. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help you with that. Would you be surprised to find out that the Field of 68 is home to more than 35 podcasts? More than 25 team-specific podcasts that are hosted by the people that know what fans want the most. The Goodman and Humble podcast, the DTF podcast, the A10 Insider podcast, and the Mountain West podcast. But wait, there's even more. The Field of 68 will be launching the ACC Insider podcast this year. Subscribe to this channel and come along for the ride.
Wild night in the SEC. I mean, you think about it here as we welcome you back to After Dark, and you had Arkansas, you had Texas A&M, and you had Florida take a lead. Arkansas did have a brief one, but basically you're taking a lead in the final 10 seconds of your respective games. So Arkansas's largest lead came on the final shot of the game tonight against Georgia. Florida and A&M took their first lead on their last shot. So just an utterly insane night in the best conference in college basketball, the best collection of teams we've seen in a league in a long, long time, and in the modern day, maybe ever. Let's turn to the Big East. Let's go to Manhattan. It's a Wednesday night. So I'm just going to tell you both right now, having covered this league very closely the last several years, the amount of times that I've seen a St. John Xavier game not filled at Carnesecca Arena, and the couple of times they had played at the Garden the past couple of years, there's been 7,000 people in the building. It's a lot. Tonight you're watching that game. There's 15,000 people in the stands on a weeknight at Madison Square Garden. And St. John's is down by 16. And for the third time in the last 7 games, they have overcome a deficit of larger than 15 points to win a game. Was it pretty? Far from it. They can't shoot to save their lives at times from downtown. But somehow, some way, CJ, St. John's is 17-3. They're 8-1 in the Big East. They've won 12 of their last 13 games. They win 79-71 over Xavier. Heartbreaker for Xavier, to say the least. But CJ Moore, Rick Pitino is doing that damn thing. What do you make of the Red Storm?
Well, speaking of roster construction and finding guys that kind of fit you, he's found some dudes that just will play their balls off. They're long, they're athletic, and they freaking guard you. You know, offensively, they're going to have nights where they really struggled like they had moments tonight. But, man, Xavier could not run offense late in that game. Like, they could not find anything comfortable. It basically came down to every possession late clock was almost ISO, man, hope you throw in something. Because St. John's just basically was like, you're not getting anything. You're not going to be able to run any kind of actions. And they're switchable. They're long. Man, they can really, really, really guard you. And he went out and got dudes that can guard. And he gets those guys in the best shapes of their lives. You know, you've always heard about his old Kentucky teams and the conditioning stuff he'll put guys through. And this is just an example of that. Like, these guys are well conditioned, and you can see late in games there's just no give. And that's what that was tonight. Like, there's a reason. You had the stat earlier, John. What was it that they're plus what in the second half this year?
Yeah, I've got the note here. Good segue here. Because in the second half of games, they're the second best team in scoring margin. I haven't updated the stat yet, but this is what it was as of a couple days ago. Best second half scoring margin among power conference teams this year. Duke, plus 185. There's some people who believe they're the best team in the country. Auburn's plus 168. Tennessee's plus 161. Above both of them, St. John's at plus 170. And on this night, they're down by 10 at halftime. They outscore Xavier 35-25 in the second half, and in overtime 14-6. CJ, you're right. Like, I joke about it, but I do say this because two coaches have said this to me, opposing coaches. In the second half, they've taken our manhood. What they're trying to say is in the second half, they just hit this gear that other teams cannot hit from a physicality and hustle standpoint. And they are the classic case of, like, if you like old school Northeast basketball, that's what Pitino has cooking here, Mike. And they are legit. They have punched that door down, and they're showing that they're just going to outwill teams. And they did it again tonight.
Yeah, and you talked about the margin, right, in the second half margin. I mean, all three of those teams that you mentioned are really good defensive teams. So that's part of what contributes to that. But there may not be a scarier team in the country when St. John's gets into desperation mode. Like, when they get into desperation mode, it is blouses. Like, and CJ, you touched on it. Everything was east-west for Xavier in the second half. I mean, everything St. John's defense was impenetrable. There were no gaps. Switching five ways, switching up, getting into you. I mean, at one point, Sean Miller turned to his bench, is like, I can't have any bigs in here because I need all guards, I need all ball handlers, or we're just going to turn it over every possession. So they put you in such a bind, and I thought in the second half they played to their strengths. They said, hey, let's lean on our defense, let's turn you over, and let's eliminate our deficiencies. Let's stop shooting threes. We were 1 for 9 in the first half. They took 3 threes in the second half in overtime combined. So they took that out of the equation. And I thought that was the difference. And we'll see what the full resume ends up looking like for them. But I mean, let's be real, right? They have 3 losses right now, 17-3. Those 3 losses are by a combined 5 points. Like, they are 3 possessions away from being 20-0. And that's kind of wild to think about when you look at it that way. They've been just dominant in a lot of these games. Good.
You do have to bring up the fact that, and I totally agree with you on the 5 points thing. Had they beaten Baylor, they would have played Tennessee. Now, who knows?
Fair.
But you never know if that game
would have been in the 40s.
Yeah.
They would have played that one in the 40s.
Yeah,
St. John's can win that game. St. John's could absolutely win that game against Tennessee.
That's the point. That's the
They're
point.
similar though. They're similar to Tennessee.
Yeah.
They just don't have the Chaz Lanier that can hit 5 threes or 6, 7 threes in a game. But they're kind of similar teams. They just wear on you physically.
Yeah,
right.
I'll just share. We have to move on, but I'm just going to share this here briefly. This is the quote of the night from Rick Pitino that sums up this team. Quote: "We cannot take losses. It's a non-negotiable thing for us." And that's the attitude we have. And that's why we come back. I think these guys have a great fear of losing. A great fear, and that's a good thing. Yeah, the fear is that they'd have to put up with you the next day, and nobody wants to practice like that because that's what it is. Rick Pitino gets you to want to win so bad that the alternative, you can't have it. Let's go to the Big 12. Kansas is at TCU. Kansas, they look bad early. They did not look good early in this game, CJ. But they outscored TCU 41-26 in the final 20 minutes. Hunter Dickinson had 16 points, 5 Jayhawks scoring double figures, and you look up and Kansas is 14-4. I want to go beyond the game. Has Kansas showed you something the last couple of weeks that's leading you to believe that perhaps they're accelerating as a ball club?
They're starting to find a little bit of an identity, and they're leaning into their defense. Shaquille Moore going into the starting lineup has been a big part of that, and they're starting to, like tonight, they were keeping Hunter Dickinson basically under the basket, and him and Flory were switching stuff. If his man went out to the perimeter, Flory stayed out there, and he took Flory's guy that was going down low. So they're starting to figure out a way how to succeed defensively. Their defense led to offense a lot of times tonight. They're hitting the offensive glass harder because they're not a great shooting team. So they're kind of starting to find an identity a little bit. But the key is still going to be, like, are those transfers going to come on? And finally tonight, AJ Storr showed a little bit of life. He played hard. He got some steals. He got some hustle buckets. It was his best game as a Jayhawk, and that's why they have to feel decent about how it went tonight, because they finally got something from him, and if he can be a contributor, then the changes the calculus. Like if he can give you something, their ceiling raises. But they're still a team. They've been kind of searching for an identity here for months, and I think that's the big difference in the last couple of weeks is they're maybe finally starting to kind of figure out, okay, here's what we can be good at.
Yeah, I think Bill Self's in an interesting spot because I think he's still searching for that rotation and personnel grouping that he feels like he can really lean on. But the issue is that every personnel grouping has some sort of trade-off, right? I mean, if you go 4 guards, you're much lighter defensively, but you may be a little bit better offensively. If you go with a Dickinson-Badunga pairing, you may give up some spacing offensively, but you're definitely, I think, more athletic and more stout defensively. But that final 8 minutes of the first half, when they got back into this game, Self just rode with the group he had on the floor, and it was Harris, it was Mayo, it was Griffin, it was Badunga, and it was Dickinson. And so this team has proven that they can be elite defensively, and I think they need to lean into that. I think to me, Badunga, just for however many minutes you can keep him out there without him getting in foul trouble, that dude needs to play. And he's so important because he fortifies the defense. Another 4 blocks tonight for him. He can switch out onto the perimeter and hold his own. And then offensively, like, although he takes spacing away, like, he generates second chance opportunities. And he had another 3 offensive rebounds tonight. So I just think he's so impactful. He's continued to kind of creep his way into the rotation. I know KJ Adams being out helps that. But even when KJ Adams returns, like, you already got a guy that's a non-spacer. Like, why not? And I love KJ Adams. I love what he brings to the table. Why not lean on the guy that's got a little bit more size, a little bit more impact around the rim defensively as a rim protector? I'm curious to see who they go with moving forward, because, like, you lean on those 4, Harris, Mayo, Badunga, and Dickinson, and then that fifth spot is just who's got it going that game. All right, is it Storr? Let's ride with them. Is it Griffin? Let's ride with them. Is it Shaq Moore? Let's ride with them. Coit? Let's ride with them. Like that's I think the way it's got to go for Kansas moving forward.
And I think Badunga being out there helps Dickinson in some ways. They can benefit off of each other in ways that
He's always played with another big. Dickinson has played 7 years of college basketball, and he has never played without another big on the floor with them. It's incredible.
It is, but look at their combined numbers tonight. They go for a combined 26 and 19 with 5 assists. Saturday night we find out. If Kansas has turned a corner. Because if you haven't checked, Houston only allowed 36 points tonight to Utah. That is just plain 1930s type ugly. But that's how Houston's going to take you out into the parking lot. They're just going to beat the tar out of you. And we'll see at Allen Fieldhouse what happens on Saturday night. That is a huge game in the Big 12. Now to our guest of the night, an After Dark special. The full exclusive is tomorrow, about 25 minutes long. Mike LaTulip and I caught up with a head coach who in his first season at the helm has brought the revival to Louisville. The Cards have won 9 in a row. Here's a piece of our conversation with Pat Kelsey.
Everyone has preseason expectations. You've spent time with this team now. They've grown, I'm sure in your eyes since the Bahamas. And, where you're at right now in the ACC. I'm just curious. You talked about successful results a couple minutes ago, and everybody defines that differently, whether it's, second weekend or Final Four, or people do that, and then people just have other ways of defining it. Like when you walk back into your office in April, and like what would make you say, man, that was a successful year one?
Yeah, that's an unbelievable question. And the best way I could answer that, and again, basketball, coaching, teaching is so much about borrowing is the nice word, stealing stuff from other people. In the great Jay Wright, right? One of the greatest coaches in the history of our sport, was a confidant, close friend, is a close friend to Josh Hurd, our athletic director. So I got to know him a little bit, after I got the job, just because of Josh's relationship. And he gave me some great advice. And then I read a bunch of stuff on him, listened to some of his podcasts. Coming off national championships several years ago, people asked him, what would you consider a successful season? Going to another Final Four, winning another national championship. Is anything less than that what you would consider reaching your goal? And he said, we have one goal and one goal only. It's to strive to have the number one culture in the country. And that is a overused word in leadership and in coaching and in business, I know, but it's what he says about that is kind of that process-oriented approach to attaining success that we try to have. You can't always control the bounce of a ball. You can't control the matchups in the NCAA tournament or whatever, injuries and things like that. But what you can control is having a team that, in your opinion, there's no scoreboard, no rankings, has the best attitude in the country, that has the best approach, that has the best connectedness, that has the best camaraderie, that goes about their work, all of the things that make up the core tenets of your program. Do you have the best culture in the country, and strive for that? And I really believe the results take care of themselves. Listen, I'm not saying we have all the answers and we have it figured out. There might be 40, 50, 60 teams out there that, if there truly was a scoreboard, have a better culture than us, but I doubt it. Man. It starts with the loyalty of my staff. Their ability to teach, develop relationships, develop players, our players taking ownership of the team, the leadership, the personal leadership, team leadership that they have, the way we go about our business, the positivity, the smiles on faces, the toughness, the nastiness, the competitiveness. That's what we focus on every day. And when I walk back in my office in April, as you mentioned, what would I consider a successful season that I could sit there and go, man, I don't know. It'd be really tough to have a better DNA than our organization than we had this year. We're not perfect. We might have a bad thing, but that's what we strive for. And I believe if we can accomplish that, we will be the best version of ourselves put ourselves in the best position to have the most possible success. And, I'd like to think I'll really be happy with the results. Our fan base and our university will be happy as well.
The Revival. It's real. It's happening in the Ville. Louisville has their longest winning streak in half a decade, and they're back in action Tuesday night at the KFC Yum Center against a Wake Forest team that I know you, Pat Kelsey, have a lot of respect for in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Coach, congratulations on the amazing start to this season at 15-5 through your first 20. We love this story in college basketball. We appreciate you taking the time with us.
John and Mike, appreciate you guys having me on. L's up, the Revival.
Great stuff, and you can see our full conversation with Pat Kelsey tomorrow, or later today, on the Field of 68 on all of our platforms. Mike LaTulip and I greatly enjoyed that conversation. You can see it all later on this Thursday. All right, toast of the night, fellas. Toast of the night. Mike LaTulip, who you toasting?
I initially was gonna toast just the literal tie-up that Hunter Dickinson had with pretty much the entire TCU team that went on for about 40 seconds. I wanted to almost personally toast that. I thought about toasting Dawn Staley's big hat that they showed 12 times, I think, during the Florida game on the sideline. But we touched on it a little bit. I'm going to toast Houston tonight. I think they've quietly just continued to string together wins, 7-0 now in the Big 12, and just had Utah in shackles tonight, holding them to 36 points. And then we touched on how big of a game that is coming up with Kansas. So I'm a toast to the Houston Cougars.
I like that. And I think, last year they went to Allen Fieldhouse. They fell. Then they got revenge. That's a gigantic game on Saturday. And CJ Moore will be in the house. Just to see Houston's defense, all they do to limit you offensively, CJ, and then can they generate enough scoring on their end? Has Kansas turned a corner, in fact? Can they match the toughness on the glass and defensively? There's so many questions to that game, CJ. I can't wait. But who you toasting?
It'll be a fun one. I'm going to go with, it's been the year of the freshmen, right? So many freshmen have had such great performances this year. And one guy who came into the year with a ton of hype that we've kind of forgotten about because he got off to a little bit of a slow start, but he's been terrific lately. And tonight, Baylor was in trouble. Baylor was down 14 to K-State in the second half. That would have been a bad loss because we know K-State hasn't had a very good season. But VJ Edgecombe pours in 20 of his 30 in the second half, went 5 of 5 from the field, 9 of 10 at the line. So 30 points from that kid tonight, and gets Baylor. They hold on to get that win with no Jeremy Roach. Toast to VJ. He's starting to come on. So another freshman that's been terrific lately.
Toast to VJ Edgecombe. Okay. So I never pick high majors, or very, very rarely do, for Toast of the Night. So it's not going to be that tonight. Because the longest winning streak by a non-high major team in college basketball belongs to the team in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. The Cleveland State University Vikings, who started the season 4-6. 4-6 through 10 games, have won 11 in a row. 11 in a row after a 65-50 win tonight over Detroit Mercy. The Vikings are atop the Horizon League. Not just atop it, they're 9-1. They have a 2-game lead in that league. They're having a remarkable season. Shout out to Daniel Robinson, his staff. I think Jay Shunner's one of the best assistants you're going to find. And Cleveland State, they get a big game, 23 points from Tevin Smith. He was terrific tonight. Smith's a senior from Danville, Illinois. They got 13 points from Jashawn Stevenson off the bench. They're playing great defense. They grind you down. And that's a program over the years. Dennis Gates not at Missouri without Cleveland State. If you all remember, Gary Waters, right, and Norris Cole, they won a tournament game over Wake Forest. this is years ago now in Miami. That program's had some good moments over the years. They got another damn good team, and they've won 11 straight games. So a toast to you, my Cleveland State Vikings. They call the Wolstein Center home, and they're winning with gritty Cleveland toughness. Shout out to Cleveland State.
I played there, John. I played there. Overtime win against Cleveland State. My 5th year overtime win against Cleveland State. Just saying.
There it is, Michael. You're doing what others are not doing right now, and that's have success against the Vikings. So that's going to do it for us. We're back tomorrow night. We got more Big Ten hoop. We got a busy evening tomorrow night, and we're just getting rolling here into what we're calling those dog days of winter. Where tonight in the SEC, we saw it. You saw a bunch of drama, and that's what makes these nights in college basketball so much fun. For CJ Moore, for Mike LaTulip, I'm John Fanta. Keep it locked on all our platforms. This has been the Field of 68 After Dark.